in a way that, in many ways, added to the appeal of the United Nations across the world. But I would argue that possibly, had the permanent members realized what they were getting, they would not have voted for these two individuals. So that is as frank as I can be from this podium at this time. Thank you, sir.
My name is Selva Purusabi. My question is, why did the US oppose your candidacy as Secretary General?
You really will have to ask the US administration of the day that question. The then ambassador, Mr. Bolton, has written his memoir and has indicated that there were good reasons for them to oppose me, and in particular that they were committed to seeing Mr. Ban elected. He also added the very unkind statement, considering that the US did vote for Mr. Ban, that he had instructions that they did not want a strong Secretary General, quote unquote. Well, I don't believe that's fair, and I frankly would not take Mr. Bolton very seriously on these matters. But that's the only published statement by any American official about that vote. So unfortunately, that is the one thing that is publicly available. I do believe that Mr. Ban has a lot of good qualities. I have known him well for many years. In fact, when he was working in the United Nations as Chief of Staff to the then Korean President of the General Assembly for 1 year in 2000, we worked together very well, and have high respect for his dedication, his real capacity for hard work. And India stands very solidly behind Mr. Ban as he tries to steer the United Nations at this difficult time.
Yes, Sarita Guru. I'm delighted to listen to you, but you mentioned that the relationship between India and Africa is one of thousands of years, and recently, after independence of our country, there has been of course, our relationship with India is one of 175 years of indentureship, but more than that, there have been free artisans and other Indians who have come from Kerala precisely and Pondicherry to build Mauritius during the French period. And Mauritius is as you said, a bridge between India and Africa, is a stepping stone. But in the recent developing process, we find that India has somehow lagged behind in the process of capacity building and all the other development procedures in Africa. And now we find that there is a very big friendly country, China, which is implanting itself in Mauritius, in precisely Changi, and where it is being used as a great stepping stone. Isn't it that India has been already overtaken by China in this process of partnership with Africa?
Thank you. Well, the language of overtaking implies a race, and we don't feel there is a race that we're scrambling for. We feel that the needs of Africa are genuine enough and great enough for there to be enough room for both China and India, and for that matter, the West as well. The West has a historic responsibility for Africa as well, and they too should contribute to Africa's development. I think there is enough opportunity and enough need for the Western world, China, India, and anybody else who wishes to contribute to come in and do their best. I assure you that India will not be found wanting. As I said in my remarks, we have actually increased our level of assistance to Africa, both in terms of grants and in terms of lines of credit. As you know, we ourselves have huge problems still to overcome. And we congratulate China for what they've accomplished, and we hope they will continue to do well. But we in India, while attending to the pressing needs of our own people, continue to do a great deal for Africa out of a conviction that has never wavered. Let me say one thing without much immodesty. India has never been wrong on Africa. We were right there at the start. Right from the moment of our independence. As I said, even before our independence, Pandit Nehru convened an Afro-Asian States Conference. But from our independence onwards, we have been out there fighting for Africa. An Indian delegate, later Justice Muhammad Karim Chagla, raised the issue of South African apartheid at the United Nations a year before India itself had become free. And then we've had India chairing the Decolonization Committee of the United Nations, steering so many African countries to independence at a time when, quite frankly, others whom we have mentioned were absent from the field. So India is not a newcomer to the process of African development, nor is it a newcomer to the challenges being faced by Africa, political, security, and economic challenges. And we have stood with Africa throughout to the limits of our capacity, and we will continue to do so, even as our capacity, we hope, to do more increases.
Excuse me, I'm Priyanka Ramyan. I wanted to know, some years ago you wrote an article about less and less Indian women wearing the sari.
Look at you.
I'm still very young, but as an Indian woman, I'm still very young. But the situation has changed now. Thank you.
Sorry, Peter, everyone is enjoying your comment.
Some years ago, you wrote an article about less and less Indian women wearing the sari. I wanted to know whether the situation has changed now.
No, it's an article that got me into a lot of trouble, so thank you for getting me into trouble again this evening. Because the truth is that if this were taking place in an Indian university today, with exactly the same number of women as are in this auditorium, you would probably see fewer saris than in Mauritius. And that is a shock to many of you, and it was a shock to me, but it is truly what is happening. Now, the first thing I should say is I fully accept the criticisms that came my way when I wrote this article, that I have no business as a man to be implying I have any right to tell Indian women what to wear. So I start off with that premise. But having said that, I think it's a gorgeous garment. I love my mother and my sisters in saris, so I'm not speaking purely sort of out of this male gaze that the feminists so dislike. But I also think that it has a lot. It speaks for a lot. When an Indian woman wears a sari, it does in many ways stand for a culture, a civilization, as well as all the personal and attractive attributes that you can add to that. And so there is a slight sense of loss that it is being so readily discarded in favor of the more practical. But I accept from the words of women themselves that the sari is not the most practical garment to wear when trying to catch a bus, for example, in other walks in life. I suppose there's also been a certain implication that professional women should not look too attractive. They should be dressed in a business-like fashion. And so the Western suit or the pantsuit or that sort of a garment is seen somehow, quote unquote, as more professional. See, I grew up in an India where I saw lots of professional women in saris. So I never made that association between the sari and unprofessionalism. But apparently a lot of today's young women do. And this is indeed changing, and it's changing precisely amongst young women. So since 65% of India's population is under 35, the sari is in for a rough time.
I wanted to just say one very important thing, because the UNDP resident rep, Mrs. Akare, was a very good friend of Mauritius and a very good friend of India. But she was aghast that she did not know India enough, and she knew it mainly through CNN and BBC. So we urged her to go to Coimbatore and have a lovely massage and have a Kerala trip. She went. And on her way back, she went to Pune, where she was thrilled with the three-wheel scooter. And she said, my God, that's the answer to our prayers in Liberia. And she went all out looking for the agent who is going to sell the whole scooter, not parts. She had a problem. When she came back, she got back to India. She was, at that time the email was not so popular. She faxed, and I tell you, the poor woman was all set to sell loads and loads of our scooters from India. But there is a lot to be said about networking and walking the talk, Shashi. I promise you, lots of people go blah, 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 and sentiment and emotion and blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to the exhibition, I promise you I weep, because there's nobody attending them. And the Africans who we invite, many of them can't come for one reason or the other. So finally, the whole thing is so much noise, but nothing happening in here. So I'm pleading because I think I'm forgetting the UN business. You are the right man in the right job, and there's a big job waiting for you to make us visible, to make us tangible, and to make us real partners in the business of Africa, India. That's one point. The second very small point I have is a quarrel with my government of Mauritius. I feel the Mauritian government is all out with our 2 million tourists. Now it's 1.5, no, Jyoti? Yeah, 1.5. It's gone down. It's even gone down to 875 this year. So this tourist group that come from all of Europe and all the countries in the world, mostly Europe, they are captive. They are held captive at the coast. They don't know Mauritian dal puri. I mean, I haven't had time to give you a taste of it, but I'm just saying. There's no time for the Mauritian goodies. And you won't believe, they are stuck out there, captive audiences, captive consumers, and no Mauritian benefits from the massive tourist industry that's happening in this country. Now, India comes in. India comes in. You are right there.
May I request members of the audience to be as short as possible?
Yes, thank you. The last bit I have to say, while you are there, make mainstream tourism happen so that everybody in Mauritius can benefit in one way or another. Thank you.
Let me briefly respond. On the first point, clearly, you had the applause of the audience. We need to match the talk with action. I think all my colleagues who've come from India have taken note. I think things have improved since the time you recount. Indeed, our auto rickshaws are certainly available for export, but we will take note of that. And on tourism, I think certainly there's a lot of scope for much more tourism development between both countries. I think your country is so beautiful. I think it should get 4 times the number of tourists it gets. But it should also get a lot more Indians. And I think that just as we have so many Indians now going on package tours to Singapore and Bangkok, I have no idea why they shouldn't be coming here. And part of the problem may lie in how many flights, how many seats on planes, how many hotel rooms. But once that development takes place, this would be absolutely gorgeous. Every person I've seen from India, and I met another family at my hotel, are just enthralled by what they see of Mauritius. And we'd love to encourage more of that in the mainstream. And of course, the benefit should reach all Mauritians, but that's up to the way in which that's divided in this country is not for me to say. Thank you.
I'm Shashi Tharoor from the University of Mauritius. You know, Mauritius is in the zone francophone. How does India feel about that? And don't you think that all the projects from Mauritius would be rather focused on those things, you know, those pays or a zone francophone, north or south?
Mais j'ai bien l'impression que vous êtes à la fois francophone et anglophone. Ce qui me frappe est justement le fait même que le français ait survécu 158 ans de la colonisation britannique, ce qui est impressionnant. Mais en même temps, vous travaillez en anglais, vous faites vos études en anglais, vous avez ces conférences en anglais, votre parlement, votre gouvernement travaille en anglais. Donc vous avez les deux à la fois. Et même si vous appartenez à la francophonie, vous appartenez également au Commonwealth. Et pour nous, pour l'Inde, de pouvoir travailler avec vous, de toute façon, ça va au-delà de la langue. Parce que notre lien, c'est un lien de cœur.